the market, in reality, does more like this. Although a lot of people will present these long-term lines, the red line, and that is true over 80, 100 years or whatever, property prices do that. But the market, like all markets, are cyclic. They go through these booms and busts, and whatever anyone says, in a market, you'll never get rid of booms and busts. There's a period where everyone piles in and it's driven by greed, and then it tops out, there's a correction, and then there's fear, and then it bottoms out, and it's cheap again, and it starts going up. This is the way any market cycle works. So this is what happens, although the long-term trend, the long-term red line is all this stuff that people waffle on about we are in Ireland, there's fewer houses built since the 30s, rising populations, more households, all that sort of stuff makes this long-term trend happen. But in reality, there is market cycles which creates these booms and busts along the way. And there are periods where property prices grow, and they grow a lot, and prices are way above the long-term average. And there are periods where property prices slump, and they are below the long-term average. Now let's put some dates in this. I didn't know it at the time, but I invested in property around about here. You can get this graph and the data on the Nationwide Building Society website, and also on the RICS website, Royal Institute of Chartered Surveyors. They have all it. But the Nationwide website has it more graphically like this. So 1990 was an interesting time. After a period of nuttiness in the property market, property prices reached a point where they were more or less on the long-term average line. And that's when I started investing. And that's really a time when I filled my boots, buying all sorts of properties. I didn't know it back then, but really, buying any property below the long-term average line makes sense. Because if you're keeping property for that 7 to 10 year long haul, and you're looking for it as a serious sort of long-term investment, you know that, even if you buy there, you know there may be some downward, but essentially, if you're keeping it for 7 to 10 years, it's below that long-term average line, and it makes sense. The other thing about property is this. A lot of people say, well, I'm going to wait for when the market bottoms out. There's a big problem with that. With shares, if I was to tell you that the stock market is bottoming out tomorrow, you can ring your broker and buy as much as you want. But if I was to tell you, look guys, I have a crystal ball, I've been into the future, and I know the bottom of the property market is next Thursday, how many properties can you buy next Thursday? Because we're not doing buy-to-sells, that doesn't work anymore because there's no resale market. It's much more buy-to-let. So that means you've got to buy a property below market value that will generate a decent cash flow, get it kitted out, find the tenants, absorb it into your portfolio before moving to the next one. And those sort of things take time. So really, the people that do well in property buy a lot of stuff below the line, below the long-term average line, space out their investments, and take the view, take the 7 to 10 year view, that buying any property below its long-term average is not a bad idea. So then we had, obviously, 2007, the heights, and this is an interesting thing. Now is the first time in nearly a decade that property prices are spot on the long-term average line. Now we have had the longest period ever since property prices recording was started. We've had the longest period ever of above the line, above the long-term average line. And that's been the boom run that we've had because of the economy, because of the housing market, debt, and all the rest of it. But now we're seeing this. We're now more or less spot on the line. Now, if you take the view that the property market's cycling, I think if we did a straw poll, I mean, who thinks property prices are going to go up this year? No one. Who thinks property prices will be up 10 years from now? I mean, there are a lot more people more confident about the 10-year outlook than the 1-year outlook, because I think we all know that the market is cycling. So if you believe that the market does go up in the long term, which is by the show of hands, that's what people do, and if you also believe that the market is cycling, and you take this data that we are now on the average, on the long-term average line, which is the first time in over nearly a decade, then any time to buy over the next few years is not going to be bad. And hence, what I say to people now is now's the time to think about filling your boots, because we're going to go below the line, and it's about not buying tons and tons of property, one every week or anything like that, but pacing out investments in good buy-to-let, cash flow generating properties, while property prices are below that line. A lot of people ask, when will property prices come back to 2007 levels? I'd say 2015. Just put it out way into the future. You can't. I haven't got a crystal ball. I don't know for certain. But what I am saying by putting out a date like 2015. So 2015, it will return to 2007 levels. When you have a date that's so far into the future, you start to look at property investing in a different way. Because during the boom, when it's above the line, what's everyone investing for? Growth. People are mad on capital growth. People are mad on refinancing all the time and pulling equity out of the deal and then doing more and more and more. That's not going to be something that people will be able to do for some time to come. So why buy a property? What's the point in buying and holding a property now? Cash flow. Cash flow. You've got to generate some cash flow. So the only properties which are really worth buying in the short term are ones that you can buy cheap, because you're buying off motivated sellers, because of this below the line trend, and ones which you can cash flow well, because that will see you through. The other thing that's interesting is that the bottom here is always, has always been higher, much higher, than the bottom of the previous cycles. And generally, of all the people I know who have bought properties here, who have still got them, I don't know anyone who's left.